I will tell this as plainly as I can, because plain truth is the only thing that steadies me now. If you live near the water, if you know the way a cold draft can turn a hallway into a wind tunnel, if you have ever woken in the black middle of night and listened to a house decide what it will creak about, then you will understand why I waited so long to say what happened. But I need you to hear me, and I need you to believe me. It began with breathing. Not mine. The Admiral District of Seattle has a way of settling into you. My old rental sat on a sloped street where twilight lingered on cedar bark and porch lights made small halos through mist. We had lived there long enough to know which neighbors kept early beds and which ones rolled back in after closing time. By last March, we were boxing up our lives, ready to move closer to my mother's job at the university. I remember thinking, finally, whatever heaviness had followed us would stop once we crossed the ship canal. The night that changed everything was March 30th. I lay on my side, blanket pulled to my chin, face angled toward the nightstand where my phone slept with me, its charging cord a white vein. I kept it close out of habit. Early alarms, quick checks of the time. Most nights, when city quiet flattens into one unbroken line, that glowing rectangle makes you feel less alone. The sound came as my dream dissolved. Low at first, like someone dragging a cinder block through river mud. Then it sharpened into a rasp, the kind of harsh breath you hear when somebody who should be sleeping is trying to breathe through a throat full of thorns. I held my breath to make sure it was not mine. The rasp kept going, its rhythm irregular, catching and releasing, as if a man were exhaling through splitting reeds. It came from the far corner near my desk. Then it moved. It moved the way a cold front moves, not fast, not slow, but with the patience of something that has been traveling a long time and does not need to rush anymore. The blanket tightened under my hands. I wanted to sit up, to flip on the lamp, to do something that would make sense of the dark. Instead, I stayed very still and counted my heartbeats until they broke rhythm. 20 minutes, 30 maybe. Time turned into a cold, hammered thing. When my phone buzzed, I came up like a drowning man. The name on the display was Mason Downs. "You okay?" he asked before I could speak. "What do you mean?" "You sound off," he said. I thought something happened. He was trying to make it casual, and I was trying to sound normal, and between those two efforts there was a lot we did not say. Finally, he brought it up. "Remember that beach party last weekend?" he said. He was trying to make it casual, and I was trying to sound normal, and between those two efforts there was a lot we did not say. Finally, he brought it up. "Remember that beach party last weekend?" he said. We had called it stupid, and we were not wrong. Everyone we knew had been there anyway, and if I had not had a shift the next morning, I probably would have gone too. "We ended up at the old lighthouse," he said. "Not inside, not at first. People wanted to go down to the shore. There is a fence now, but you can get around it if you go far enough to the west. Someone told a story about a body they found on the beach years ago. Then we went up to the lighthouse and messed around. Nothing happened. We left." His voice did that thing good liars think you will not notice. A slight drag on the consonants. Silence where an easy detail should be. I wanted to tell him about the breathing in my room. I wanted to pile words on top of fear until I could not see it anymore. Instead, I let the silence stand there between us like a figure in a doorway. After a while, he hung up. In the morning, I called. No answer. Later, his mother answered from their landline. Mason was sick, she said. He had been vomiting. The doctor called it laryngitis because of how raw his throat sounded, and she said the test showed nothing else. He should sleep. He should be fine in a day or two. When I asked if she knew anything about the lighthouse out at Alki Point and the story about the body, it was his father who came on the line. He did not like gossip. He did not like the way people in this city chew on tragedies like gristle and then spit them into someone else's garden. But he had heard talk. Suicides. Disappearances. Suffocations no one could explain. For years the lighthouse had been a ready-made dare, a place people went when they needed a proof of courage they could photograph. And then, one day, a new owner took it over, and the tours waned, and the stories got quieter. Best leave it alone, he said. Places die the way people die. They deserve to stay down. That evening I told my mother. We had a plan to move in May, a week or two sooner if the lease at the new apartment came through. She is an archivist at Seattle Pacific, and like other archivists I have known, she believed in the sturdy relief of facts. She listened and told me sleep would be better in a different place. She did not say she believed in anything except the way houses hold sound. Crickets stitched the night outside my window. When their chorus thinned, a kind of clean emptiness spread. I have learned that a certain kind of empty is not empty at all. It is an invitation. The breathing returned and grew clearer. Rage is not a word I use to describe sounds, but I felt rage in it, a steady, digging spite. Footsteps slapped on the floor, wet and deliberate, as if the person had walked out of a tide and into my room. The rasp reached the height of my face. I could feel breath move across the skin between my eyebrows the way wind lifts the hairs on your arm. I folded myself against the headboard, knees to my chest. I kept my eyes shut because I knew that opening them would lock something into me that would be hard to break. The sound hung there and then, for no reason I could make, faded. In the daylight, fear turns domestic. You decide to do the dishes. You make a plan. My plan was simple. If there were stories, there were records. If there were records, my mother would know how to find them. She took me to her office at the university the next day. Concrete hallways that carry every footstep. Fluorescents that make the air look colder. Gray shades of the Pacific Northwest I had grown up inside. On a wide shelf, she pulled down a series of binders labeled Light Stations, Puget Sound, and within those, a slimmer run labeled Alki Point. In another stack, clippings and copies of clippings, a local historian's file on tragedies along the water. I read until the words began to blur. A 2013 item with a grainy photo and a caption you could tell a second stringer wrote the night shift. The body of a teen boy had been found on the shore near the point. Name, Owen Wickers. Cause, suffocation due to trauma to the neck. In another binder, a short history of the Wickers family, Dutch-German stock, who had come into ownership of the lighthouse in the 1930s and held tours through it for decades. A Coast Guard memo from 2014 indicated a transition back to full federal operation, with public tours largely discontinued. Complaints from the last visitors about a mildew smell they could not ignore. A sickly odor that clung to the lining of their coats. A word turned up in the notes, handwritten across margins and sometimes smeared, Wiedergänger. Sometimes spelled badly, sometimes underlined. A man who documented an interview with a former keeper had written it 3 times in a single paragraph as if the word itself were a nail he had to hammer until it held. I stood quickly, too quickly, and the room slid sideways. I found the bathroom down the hall and grabbed the sink. Something foreign clung to the inside of my throat, a grainy, viscous film. I retched and brought up water that looked the color of old pennies. A few strands of copper hair clung to the porcelain when it was done. You can explain almost anything to yourself if you need to. I told myself that memory is a prankster, that hair on your hands can arrive from anywhere, that pipes color what goes into them, and what comes out. Then I rinsed the sink twice, scrubbed it with a paper towel as if I had never been there, and walked back into the light. That evening, Mason texted. Sorry about the call the other night. You mad? No, I wrote back. Just worried. You okay? Better, he wrote. Tired. Voice is coming back though. I told him I had thrown up. I did not tell him about the color. He came back with a detail I wish had never arrived. We heard something in the lighthouse, he wrote. A rasping sound that came out of nowhere. Later I felt awful. Doctors think it is trauma from a bruise they found on my neck. No clue how I got it. A bruise. On his neck. He kept typing. A Coast Guard guy came by the hospital. Said there was a complaint a while back that something out there took a man's breath. I thought he was messing with me, but last night I saw a guy, only not all there. Pale, wet, hair the color of a penny. Eyes like glass. The bathroom sink rose up in my mind again, the hair I could not explain. The word in the margins. The boy in the article whose face could have been any of ours. I went back to my mother's files, past the clippings and into the interviews. Handwritten pages, transcribed pages, people who had worked at the light or grown up around it or broken into it when they were young and stupid and held their breath to see if the story was true. Wiederganger, wrote a woman who spent 3 summers giving tours. She had spelled it wrong and then corrected it above the line. She had underlined it twice and added a translation in shaky hand, the one who walks again. Other accounts fell into rhythm. Rough breathing at night from behind closed doors, in empty back staircases, from the other side of glass you could not see through. Nausea and weakness. Bruises on the neck that looked like someone had pressed a thumb there hard enough to say stop. Eyes bloodshot as if each capillary had decided to break on its own timetable. Men and women talked about seeing a man hanging over them as they woke, hair falling in 2 sticky lines beside his ears, mouth opening too wide. The pattern was there for anyone who wanted to see it. I do not think anyone wanted to see it. Not fully. That night I lay down and did not sleep. I looked up the obituary for Owen Wickers. It was a small service, closed to the public. The photo showed a boy who could have been me or Mason, pale in the way Seattle kids get by February, hair bright and copper. A dredge line dragged through my chest and caught. I read about the word Wiederganger. In folklore, he is not a vampire exactly. Not a ghost. Rest is denied to him, and so he uses what you have and calls it borrowed. He takes breath because he has none left. He walks again, but what carries him is the emptiness where living used to be. A thin, keening sound rose at the edge of hearing. The breathing came with it. The far wall darkened, then it gleamed. The paint looked wet. I left before the decision to leave formed its syllables. The hallway light switch stood halfway between me and the end of the corridor where the wall met the empty. I could hear the wet footfalls behind me as I crossed. The switch clicked under my thumb. The sound stopped cleanly, as if a tape had run out. I turned. The light between me and the bedroom hummed and then flickered. The brass of my parents' doorknob felt cool and too smooth. I raised my hand to knock. From the far end of the hall, opposite where I stood, something took form inside the flicker. It is a mercy, the way shock can soften detail. I remember a face without blood in it, a vein faint under the skin like a line drawn in pencil. I remember the hair, wet and copper. The eyes were wrong in a way I do not like describing. There are eyes that are cloudy with cataracts, and eyes that are filmed over by reflex, and there are eyes that do not know they are eyes anymore. These were like that. The body moved and complained. Popping noises from joints that had set while they should have been flexing. Steps that sounded like they came up from a dock. It came down the hallway to me and stopped in front of my mother's door. It opened its mouth, and there was a sound like paper tearing open in a dry room. The door flung wide behind me. The sound cut out as if somebody had closed a window between us. The hallway ran straight and blank to the far end. The patch of wall it had stood before shone with nothing on it. My mother asked if I was all right. I said there was something wrong. I could hear the rawness in my own voice as if I had been speaking all night. In the bathroom, I tilted my chin and turned my head left and right. Right above my collarbone, plain as any bruiser in the old-fashioned way, the skin had gone the yellowing green of a healing contusion that had never hurt when it arrived. It looked like a thumbprint left by a person who had never warmed their hands. We pushed the move date up a week. I packed as if speed could outpace the kind of thing that does not care about speed. Boxes shuffled, taped guns sang, and my mother did not say that she had started keeping a light on at the top of the stairs. I called Mason to tell him what I had seen. His father answered. I asked how Mason's eyes looked. There was a silence you do not interrupt because it is where the truth gathers. Bloodshot, he said. Bad. Last night was the worst it has been. We heard the sound again. It came from his room. I leaned my head against a wall of boxes and slid down to the floor. I kept the phone to my ear and listened to a decent man try to be decent, while he described something that had destroyed his family. He said the paramedics knew within seconds. He said there are scenes you will spend the rest of your years walking out of, step by step, and they do not care if you were a good father or not. He said his son did not look like a person should look after falling asleep in his own bed. There is a set of sentences I could write for you that would put pictures in your mind I have no right to put there. So I will tell you only that the people who came afterward were quiet in the way people are quiet when they have had to be in rooms like that too many times, and they did their work without the others in the neighborhood seeing more than they had to. We moved the following Wednesday. The apartment near campus had new carpet that smelled like a promise. On the first night, I stayed awake and listened to the kind of silence you pay extra for in the city. At 2 a.m, the refrigerator motor kicked on, and I thought I might know how to breathe like myself again. The next day, I went back to the files. There is a reason people sewed bells to coffins once upon a time. There is a reason you always leave a place at least a little for the dead, whether you admit you believe in them or not. What lives in stories is not make-believe. It is the dirt under everything else. Some families carry it on their boots for generations and track it into every room. I drew out a line of cause and effect I could live with. The boy had died in the water near the lighthouse. The family who kept that light had ushered tourists through corridors where tragedy took on the form of a prize. When the federal government took the station back, the building did not get blessed, and it did not get burned, and it did not get buried. It stayed and did what a thing like that does. It pulled breath from one person and then another. It used whatever strings ran between people to climb from one to the next. Mason and I had tugged that rope between us and given it a path. If anything like justice exists for what walked down that hallway toward me, it is not justice the way we use the word in courtrooms. It is not vengeance. I believe now that sometimes the world takes what was taken from someone and hands it back in the wrong shape. If you see it, you have to decide whether you will be the next set of hands to hold it. Here is where you want me to say I went back to the lighthouse with a Bible and a can of gasoline, and I did not. Part of me will always feel like a coward for that. Another part of me knows that fighting a thing you do not understand is how you give it more to eat. What I did instead was not brave. It was the simple act of letting a story stand in daylight long enough for it to stop being just mine. Maybe that is how you break the chain. Maybe naming what you saw with enough detail to make a roomful of strangers hold their breath at the same time is a kind of ritual we have been doing since caves, even if we stopped calling it that. I told my mother everything I had not said. We did not talk about it as a curse. We did not talk about it as a haunting. We talked about it as the way a place can press a shape into the people who walk through it until they fit. She retired a set of keys and a stack of files. She put in a request that certain boxes be quarantined for conservation due to mold risk. You might call that a harmless bureaucratic maneuver. It meant fewer people would pick up those old accounts in their hands and walk the word inside them back to their cars. It meant some of the stories would be allowed to rest inside the kind of silence that does not invite. I changed my number. I scrubbed everything of Mason that I could not keep without breaking open. When the police called to ask about the last messages I had with him, I told them and did not tell them more. I do not think they would have believed me if I had, and I do not think they needed those pictures in their minds either. The bruise at my neck faded into the shade of the rest of me within a week. I took long showers and let steam fill the new bathroom and stepped out into a towel like a man surfacing. I stood in the kitchen at 3 p.m. and listened to the absence of anything wrong. I looked out of the apartment windows at the way the light falls across the canal when the clouds are thin and saw an ordinary day laid out like an invitation. Still, there are nights when I wake to a quiet that is a little too clean. When I do, I walk the length of the apartment and stand in the doorway of my room and look down the hall. I put a hand on the wall the way a doctor taps a chest. I say a name that is not mine and wait to hear if anyone answers. No, I do not know that it is over. No one who has heard a sound like that at their bedside will ever say that. But I know what I owe. I owe you the warning I did not get. Do not go into places where tragedies have been made into tours. Do not chase a thrill into a building that has decided to keep score. Do not let someone talk you into making a joke of what someone else did not survive. If you do, and if you come home and the hallway is wet and the light stutters, remember this much: there was a boy with copper hair who did not get to keep his breath, and since then something has been paying itself back with interest. I wish I had a better ending for you. The best I can give you is a clear one. The thing that came down the hall for me wants to be carried. Every time we pass a story like this around the way we pass a bottle at a party, we risk becoming the next set of lungs to fill it. I do not think it cares whether you believe in it or not. I think it cares that you listen. So if you have been listening, take a breath. Hold on to it. Let the rest out slow. And if you have something to say about what violence takes from people, about the ways injustice keeps walking when it should lie down, say it now. I am asking you to. Not because a comment box will change the world, but because choosing a side does. Tell me whether you believe in a story's ability to hurt the living. Tell me where you draw the line between courage and cruelty, between daring and disrespect. Tell me whether you think places remember what we do to them, and whether you think we owe those places anything back. Tell me what you would have done, and what you think I should have done, and what you will do if you ever find yourself alone in a hallway when the light begins to flicker.